19 UN workers were among the victims in Ethiopian Airlines plane crash. The flight route from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia's capital, to Nairobi, Kenya, is sometimes referred to as AU.N shuttle because of how often United Nations staff members take it. On Sunday, when Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 plummeted to the ground shortly after takeoff, killing more than 150 people, the plane had a particularly high concentration of United Nations employees. At least 19 staff members died in the crash, the United Nations said in a statement. The airline said the flight had passengers from at least 30 countries, some of whom were aid workers for other humanitarian organizations. The dead included at least 32 Kenyans, 18 Canadians, 9 each from Ethiopia and France, 8 each from the United States, China, and Italy, and 7 from Britain, according to the airline, officials, and news accounts. The identities of many of the victims, including the Americans, have not been released. The World Food Programme of the United Nations said 7 of its employees died. 6 employees from the United Nations office in Nairobi were killed, the organization said, as well as 2 each from its Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights and the International Telecommunications Union. Addis Ababa and Nairobi are home to United Nations offices. But the flight between the cities may have been carrying a particularly high number of United Nations workers because it was the day before a session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, described as the world's highest-level decision-making body on the environment. The event, which starts on Monday, brings together representatives from United Nations member states to address environmental problems. A spokesman for Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, said the organization was working with the Ethiopian authorities to establish the identities of its employees aboard the flight. A British citizen, Joanna Toole, was on her way to the Environmental Assembly as a representative of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, according to a tweet from the head of her department, Fisheries and Aquaculture. A Nairobi-based staff member with the United Nations Environment Program and an employee of Aviation Industry Corporation of China were 2 of the Chinese citizens killed, according to a list of victims provided by the country's embassy in Kenya, the Global Times reported. Pius Adesanmai, a professor with the Institute of African Studies at Carleton University in Ottawa, was among the victims from Canada, the university confirmed. Professor Adesanmai, who was also associated with the university's English department, was a prominent public intellectual in his native Nigeria, where he regularly published political essays.